Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing HFY stories. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest uploads. The boat pitched again, a larger wave crashing against the hull, shaking Sam out of his disbelief. He turned back to the glowing woman, alien, he now realized, though his brain was still fighting to accept it. Her wide, luminous eyes darted to the porthole, panic etched across her face. "What do you mean, they found you?" Sam demanded, his voice rising to match the storm's fury. "Who's after you?" Before she could answer, a deep, resonant hum reverberated through the air, unlike anything Sam had ever heard. It wasn't thunder or the groan of the ship, it was something metallic, artificial, and terrifyingly close. "They hear," she whispered, clutching the strange device in her hand. She scrambled to her feet, wobbling unsteadily as the boat rocked. "We need hide. They kill." Sam's instincts screamed at him to throw her overboard, to rid himself of whatever trouble she'd brought to his vessel. But as he looked into her pleading eyes, something stopped him. She was terrified, not just for herself, but for him as well. "Stay put," he growled, shoving his knife back into its sheath. He rushed to the deck, the rain stinging his face as he burst out into the storm. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating the dark, heaving ocean. And there, cutting through the clouds like a knife, was a sleek, angular craft. It hovered silently, its surface shimmering as if cloaked in liquid mercury. Sam's heart dropped. This wasn't a plane or a drone, it was something far beyond human engineering. A piercing beam of light shot down from the craft, sweeping across the water like a searchlight. Sam dove behind a stack of crates, his pulse hammering in his ears. The beam passed over the boat, then paused, as if considering. Suddenly, the air was filled with a sharp, high-pitched whine. Sam risked a glance from his hiding spot and saw something descending from the craft, a smaller vessel, smooth and ovoid, glowing faintly like the woman below deck. "What in God's name?" Sam muttered under his breath. The smaller craft landed with an eerie precision on the boat's deck, its surface rippling like water. A section slid open with a hiss, revealing two figures stepping out. They were tall and humanoid, clad in sleek, dark armor that seemed to shift and pulse with energy. Their faces were obscured by helmets with glowing visors, and they moved with a chilling, mechanical grace. One of them held up a device, scanning the boat. A low, guttural sound emanated from the other, a language Sam couldn't begin to comprehend. "Zara," the first one said, the name emerging like a hiss of steam. Sam's stomach churned. They were here for her. Below deck, Zara clung to the shadows, her breathing shallow. She could hear the faint whir of the pursuers' devices and the muffled thuds of their boots on the deck above. Her hands tightened around her cylindrical device, a translator and signal jammer she'd managed to modify during her escape. But it wouldn't hold up against them for long. She closed her eyes, forcing herself to focus. If they captured her, it wouldn't just be her death. They would punish anyone who had aided her, and Earth would become collateral damage in her people's unrelenting quest for dominance. She had seen it before, on other worlds, in other rebellions. Her resolve hardened. She couldn't let that happen here. Sam crouched lower, trying to decide his next move. The intruders were spreading out, scanning the boat with their strange devices. His eyes darted to the cabin door. If he could lead them away from the hold where Zara was hiding. "Hey!" he shouted, springing up from his cover. He grabbed a wrench lying nearby and hurled it at the closer figure. It struck their shoulder with a metallic clang, barely making them flinch. Both figures turned toward him in unison, their movements unnervingly synchronized. One raised an arm, and a pulse of blue energy shot out, slamming into the crate beside Sam and sending splinters flying. He ducked, cursing under his breath. "That's right, over here," he yelled, backing toward the bow of the ship. The intruders followed, their visors glowing ominously. Sam's mind raced. He needed a plan, fast. He could feel the boat rocking harder under the storm's relentless assault, waves crashing against the sides. If he could just buy enough time. Suddenly, a flash of silver darted out from the shadows behind the intruders. Zara. She moved with surprising speed and agility, her translator device emitting a sharp pulse that made the intruders stagger. "Run!" she shouted at Sam, her voice cutting through the chaos. Before he could argue, one of the intruders recovered, raising its arm toward Zara. She ducked, the beam of energy missing her by inches, and lunged forward, slamming her device against the intruder's chest. The pulse it emitted sent the armored figure stumbling back, sparks flying from its suit. The second intruder turned, its movements now more erratic, as if the pulse had disrupted its systems as well. Zara grabbed Sam's arm, pulling him toward the cabin. "No fight. We go," she insisted, her glowing eyes fierce. Sam didn't need to be told twice. They bolted, the sound of malfunctioning suits and shouted alien commands echoing behind them. Zara led him to the engine room, where she quickly began fiddling with a panel. "What are you doing?" Sam demanded, his breath ragged. "Disable beacon," she said, her hands moving with practiced precision. "They track me. Need stop." Sam watched in awe as she rewired the boat's modest electronics, her alien technology seamlessly integrating with the crude human systems. The lights flickered, and the hum of the pursuer's craft outside faltered. A deafening roar shook the boat, followed by silence. Zara slumped against the wall, her glowing skin dimming slightly. "They go. For now." Sam stared at her, trying to process everything. "You just disabled their ship. With this?" He gestured at the jury-rigged setup she'd created. Zara nodded, exhaustion evident in her posture. "Temporary. They come back." Sam ran a hand through his rain-soaked hair, letting out a shaky breath. "You've got a hell of a lot of explaining to do, lady." She looked at him, her expression a mix of gratitude and sorrow. "You help. I explain." Before either of them could say more, the boat rocked violently, a wave crashing against the hull. Sam steadied himself, his mind already racing. Whatever Zara had gotten him into, it was far bigger than anything he'd faced before. But one thing was clear, he couldn't turn back now. "All right," he said, meeting her gaze. "Let's hear it." The boat rocked again, this time with less ferocity, but Sam could still feel the tension in the air. He stood there in the dimly lit engine room, eyeing the woman, Zara, who had so effortlessly disabled the alien ship's tracking system. It didn't seem possible, yet there she was, a glowing, frightened alien, running from her people to seek refuge on Earth. Sam watched her, still processing the events that had unfolded. Her silvery skin glistened under the flickering light, her eyes wide with exhaustion. She had been through so much, and yet she carried a quiet strength that Sam couldn't ignore. "We're safe for now," Zara said, her voice steady, though it trembled slightly. "But not for long. They'll come back. They don't give up." Sam nodded slowly, still reeling from the sight of the alien ship that had nearly swept him off the face of the earth. It had been unlike anything he'd ever seen before, sleek, almost organic in its design, glowing with a strange, unnerving energy. The figures who had stepped off it had moved with an eerie precision, almost like machines. It was clear they weren't ordinary aliens, they were something far more advanced. "I still don't understand," Sam muttered, running a hand through his wet hair. "Why are they after you? What did you do?" Zara let out a slow breath, her shoulders sagging as she sat down on one of the crates in the corner. I was part of a resistance," she began, her voice low. "Not a resistance like you understand, with guns and bombs. No. We fought with knowledge, with science. We fought to save my people from themselves." Sam crossed his arms, leaning against the wall. "Save them from what?" "From their leaders," she said bitterly, her eyes flashing with anger. "The Vartel, my species, were once peaceful. We lived in harmony with our planet, with the stars. But power changed us. We became conquerors, spreading across the galaxy, taking worlds to feed our own. I could not stand by and watch this happen. I tried to warn them, to make them see reason. But they didn't listen. Sam shifted uncomfortably. He'd heard stories of planets like that, worlds ravaged by greed and ambition. But nothing had prepared him for this alien conflict. You tried to stop them? He asked softly. Zara nodded, her voice breaking. Yes. I found allies within the Vartel, people who agreed with me, people who were just as horrified by what our leaders were doing. But we were caught. I was betrayed. The others, they were taken, imprisoned. And me? I ran. She stood up, pacing the small room, the glow of her skin pulsating with her emotions. I thought I could escape to a neutral world, somewhere safe. Earth, your world, seemed so different. But now they're here. They will never stop until they find me. And when they do, they will destroy everything I've worked for. Sam's mind whirled. He had never imagined himself in a situation like this, caught in the middle of an intergalactic conflict with the fate of a planet hanging in the balance. He didn't know much about alien politics, but what Zara was saying made sense. He had seen the horrors that unchecked power could bring, how corruption could destroy a civilization from within. I don't know what to do, Sam admitted, rubbing his temples. This is beyond me. What do you need from me? Zara stopped pacing, looking at him with a mixture of hope and desperation. I need your help to get off this world. I can't stay here, and I can't face them alone. They will come again, and they will bring their full force. Your planet won't be able to stop them. Sam stared at her for a long moment, trying to digest everything. He knew he was in way over his head. But there was something about Zara, something about the raw vulnerability in her eyes, that made him feel like he couldn't just walk away. I'll help you, Sam said finally, his voice steady, though his heart was racing. But you've got to tell me everything. How do we get you off Earth? Where can we go? We don't even have a plan. Zara smiled faintly, a sad glimmer in her eyes. I have a plan. But it requires trust. Sam's brow furrowed. Trust? Your people have something that the Vartel need, Zara continued. The Earth's communications networks are primitive by Vartel standards, but they have a certain resilience. They can't be easily broken. Your technology could buy us time. If we can create a disruption on a larger scale, something that hides us from their ships, we might stand a chance. Sam raised an eyebrow. Disruption? How? Zara took a deep breath, seeming to steady herself. I know of an outpost on Earth where we can repurpose their technology, a remote location. The data there will allow me to build a device, one that will send out a signal strong enough to jam their tracking systems. But we must be quick. The longer we wait, the more their ships will gather. They are already deploying reinforcements. Sam looked at her skeptically. And you're sure this will work? You can't just run forever. I have no other choice, Zara replied softly. This is the only way to stop them. Sam didn't like the sound of it, but he could see the desperation in her eyes. She was right, if they didn't act soon, the aliens would only get stronger, and Earth would become a battleground. It was a risk, but it was the only option they had. You've got a plan, Sam said, straightening. So let's do it. Where do we need to go? Zara's face softened with relief. There's a facility in the mountains, a place where human scientists have been working on satellite technology. It's remote, hidden from most eyes. If we can get there before they track us again, we might have a chance. Sam nodded, his resolve solidifying. All right, let's go. As Sam and Zara began to prepare the boat for the journey, the weight of the situation settled heavily on Sam's shoulders. The alien task force was still out there, their craft lurking just beyond the horizon, waiting for any sign of their prey. Sam knew the road ahead would be dangerous, filled with obstacles and threats from both alien and human forces. But one thing was clear, Earth was no longer just a haven, it had become the front line of a war between worlds. The Seahawk began its slow, steady course toward the mountains, its engines humming in the heavy silence. The storm had passed, but a darker, more persistent storm was brewing just beyond the horizon, one that Sam and Zara could not outrun. For now, all they had was each other, and the slim hope that they could outsmart the alien forces before it was too late. The days that followed were a blur of tension, fear, and barely contained desperation. Sam and Zara navigated the Seahawk through rough seas toward the isolated outpost Zara had mentioned, far from the prying eyes of civilization. The boat's engines, once reliable, now groaned under the strain of the storm-lashed waters, and the two of them took turns at the wheel, though the night always felt endless. Zara never slept for long, her senses constantly on high alert. Sam, too, had trouble finding rest, his mind raced, unable to escape the thought of the alien task force hunting them. As they approached the coastline, the landscape gradually changed from the endless, rolling waves to jagged cliffs and steep hills. Sam could see the outline of a dense forest on the horizon, and beyond that, the remote outpost Zara had spoken of. It was hard to believe a place like this existed, so hidden from the world, so far off the grid. Zara had said little in the past few hours, her demeanor distant and focused. She had been quiet ever since they left the boat's cargo hold, the place where she had hidden from the aliens. Sam could sense she was preparing herself for something. What, exactly, he wasn't sure, but it gnawed at him. He had no idea what kind of people the Vartel were, or how dangerous they could be. But he knew Zara had seen things, terrible things, and there was no going back now. The boat finally eased into a cove, sheltered from the worst of the wind and waves. Sam killed the engine and glanced over at Zara, who stood, staring at the dark tree-line in the distance, her eyes haunted. "We're here," Sam said, breaking the silence. "What now?" Zara turned to him, her glowing skin flickering in the dim light. "Now, we go." Her voice was firm, but there was an edge to it, something almost resigned. Sam narrowed his eyes, picking up on the tension in her posture. "Are you sure about this? You've been running for a long time. You don't have to keep going like this. You could just tell me what's really going on, why the Vartel are after you." Zara's expression faltered, her lips trembling. "If I tell you everything, you will never believe me." "Not really. You will think I am mad." She shook her head, her voice trailing off. "But they will come. They'll find us. It's only a matter of time." Sam's heart sank. He didn't want to push her too hard, but the situation felt more urgent with every passing minute. He had made a decision when he agreed to help her, and that meant trusting her. But he had his limits. Zara had already hidden things from him, things that could change everything. He needed to know the truth. "Look, Zara," Sam began, his voice gentler now. "I'm with you, okay? But I can't keep running around without understanding why. Who are these people? Why are you so important to them?" Zara hesitated, her gaze flicking to the trees beyond the cove. The air around them was thick with anticipation, as if the entire world were holding its breath. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Vartel are not just conquerors. They are manipulators. I was part of a program, a project, where we took the knowledge of other species, their technology, their minds. We experimented on them, to make them stronger, more like us. But I couldn't. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't watch as innocent beings were erased." Sam's mind raced as the weight of her words settled over him. "So, you were part of their experiments?" Zara nodded grimly. "Yes. But I didn't agree with it. I had to escape when I realized the full extent of their plan. They want to create a master race, a perfect species, and Earth. Earth is next. I was supposed to be one of their top scientists. I could have helped them with their designs, their technology, their weapons. But I didn't. Sam stared at her, the pieces falling into place. Zara wasn't just a runaway, she was a key figure in a galactic empire's twisted pursuit of control. The Vartel had been experimenting on other species, reshaping them to fit their ideals of superiority. And now, they wanted to use Earth as their next victim. How did you know they were coming here? Sam asked, his voice rising in urgency. Zara looked back at the distant outpost, her eyes flicking toward the dense trees. I've been tracking their movements. I knew the Vartel would send a ship to monitor this planet. It's all part of their plan to expand. And I knew I had to escape. The device I used to disable their ship, it's the only thing that can keep them off our trail for a while. But it won't last long. Sam clenched his fists, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. They were facing a threat far beyond anything Earth had ever experienced. Zara wasn't just a fugitive, she was a target, and the entire planet was at risk. You're not alone in this, Sam said firmly. We'll figure it out. We'll get you the help you need. We can stop them. Zara's eyes softened for a moment, gratitude flickering in her gaze. But then she turned back toward the trees. I hope you're right. But you need to understand something. This fight is bigger than you realize. The Vartel have been planning this for centuries. Earth is not just a random target for them. It's a critical part of their expansion. If we fail here, there will be nothing left to save. Sam took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words sink into his chest. The future of humanity, and the future of countless other worlds, rested on his shoulders now. What do we need to do? He asked, his voice low but resolute. We need to reach the facility, Zara replied, her tone unwavering. Once there, I can reprogram the systems to mask our signatures. The Vartel will be blind to us, and we can start working on a plan to disable their mothership. But first, we need to get to the outpost undetected. Sam glanced out at the dense forest surrounding them, knowing the path ahead wouldn't be easy. But the fight wasn't just hers anymore, it was theirs. And this time, Sam wasn't about to let the Vartel win. We'll get there, he said, his voice steady. We'll make sure they never find you. The two of them gathered what little gear they had and made their way to the edge of the cove, where the forest grew thick and dark. Zara led the way, her senses sharp as she scanned the area. Sam followed, his thoughts still spinning as they moved through the trees. The outpost was just ahead, hidden among the cliffs. The rest of the world had no idea what was happening, but Sam was starting to understand the enormity of what they faced. And as they neared the outpost, a thought crossed Sam's mind: how long could they keep running? How long until the Vartel found them? The answer was chillingly clear. The forest was thick, the air heavy with moisture and the scent of wet earth. Every step Sam and Zara took seemed muffled by the dense undergrowth, but the tension between them was palpable. The occasional snap of a twig underfoot felt like a loud declaration to the silence surrounding them. Zara moved quickly and quietly, her glowing skin now dimmed to the faintest shimmer, a tactical decision to avoid drawing attention. Sam, on the other hand, felt his pulse racing, the weight of what they were doing settling on his shoulders. Every branch that rustled seemed to echo the growing fear in his chest. They had made it through the forest without incident, but the real challenge lay ahead. The outpost was still hidden within a craggy pass, a place Zara knew intimately, but it was also the most dangerous stretch of their journey. This was where they would be vulnerable, where their chances of encountering the alien task force were highest. If they had been tracking them at all, this was the place they'd try to make their move. As they reached the edge of the cliffs, Zara held up a hand, signaling Sam to stop. She knelt down, her glowing eyes scanning the horizon. Sam crouched beside her, his own eyes darting from one end of the pass to the other, his hand instinctively going to the hilt of his knife. "What is it?" Sam whispered, his voice low. Zara's expression was focused, but a shadow of concern passed over her features. "We're not alone," she murmured. "They've found us." A sinking feeling gripped Sam's chest. He had hoped for more time, but it seemed like the Vartel were already closing in on them. He could hear nothing, see nothing out of the ordinary, but then, there was a faint hum, barely audible, carried on the wind. "Do you hear that?" Sam whispered, his voice tight. Zara nodded grimly, her posture tense. "It's them. Their ships are cloaked. We have to move." Without another word, they both rose, moving swiftly and quietly through the craggy pass. Sam's mind raced, calculating their next steps. If they could make it to the outpost, they could access the communications array and initiate the signal jamming. That would buy them the time they needed to escape, hopefully. The path was narrow and treacherous, with jagged rocks that made each step an uncertain one. Sam gritted his teeth as he navigated the terrain, trying to keep up with Zara, who seemed to glide effortlessly over the rocks despite her previous exhaustion. She was a far cry from the terrified woman he had met on his boat. Now, she was a soldier, a survivor, determined to see this through. As they neared the entrance to the outpost, Zara motioned for him to stop. She crouched behind a large boulder, her glowing eyes scanning the area with a precision that made Sam uneasy. He leaned against the rock beside her, his breath shallow as he waited for her to speak. "They're close," Zara said quietly. "Very close. But I have an idea." Sam nodded, his grip tightening on his knife. "What are we doing?" "I'm going to create a distraction," she said. "You head straight for the control room. It's not far from here. I'll hold them off for as long as I can." Sam's eyes widened. "Are you crazy?" "I'm not letting you. You'll never make it if you stay here with me," Zara cut him off, her voice firm. "Trust me. You'll be more useful inside." Sam hesitated, torn between the desire to stay by her side and the understanding that they didn't have time to argue. The sound of engines humming in the distance reminded him of how little time they had left. "I'll do it," Sam said, his voice grim. "But you better stay alive, you hear me?" Zara smiled faintly, but there was a hardness in her gaze that made Sam realize just how much she had changed since their first encounter. This wasn't the scared woman who had begged him for sanctuary, this was someone who had fought battles in ways Sam could barely comprehend. "I'll be fine. Just get to the control room." Sam nodded once, then bolted from his position, sprinting toward the outpost as fast as he could. The path was more open here, and he could feel the weight of every step as he moved, trying to remain as quiet as possible while adrenaline coursed through his veins. Behind him, Zara stood her ground. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, centering herself, and then raised her hand. The air around her seemed to hum, as if vibrating with energy. Sam turned his head for just a second, catching a glimpse of Zara as her fingers flicked in intricate motions. The rocks around her shimmered faintly with an otherworldly glow, and in that moment, Sam knew she wasn't just some fugitive, she was a force to be reckoned with. Zara's movements were precise, controlled. She sent a pulse of energy cascading through the rocks, a brilliant flash of light that blinded Sam momentarily. When the light faded, the landscape was eerily quiet, save for the distant hum of the cloaked ships above. Sam kept running, his heart pounding as he neared the entrance to the outpost. It wasn't much, just a small facility built into the mountainside, but it held critical technology. If Zara's plan worked, they could disable the alien ships and at least buy Earth some time. The door to the outpost was slightly ajar, and Sam slipped inside, silently entering the small, dimly lit room. The walls were lined with outdated technology, nothing impressive, but enough to send out the jamming signal Zara had described. He moved quickly, scanning the control panels. He didn't know how long it would take the Vartel to realize their trap had failed, but they wouldn't be fooled for long. He had minutes, maybe less. His fingers flew over the keys as he worked to hack into the system. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he bypassed security protocols, his focus intense. Finally, a loud beep echoed through the control room, signaling his success. He had done it. But as Sam allowed himself a moment of relief, a low, menacing voice broke through the comms system. "Human," the voice intoned, smooth and cold. "You've made a grave mistake." Sam froze. His stomach churned. The voice was unmistakable. It was the same one he had heard earlier when the alien task force first appeared on the boat. "You've interfered in matters far beyond your comprehension," the voice continued, its tone growing colder with each word. "And for that, you will pay the price." The lights in the control room flickered ominously, and the hum outside grew louder. The cloaked ships were preparing to land. Sam's blood ran cold. "Zara," he shouted into his comms, but the line was dead. Sam's heart raced as the voice from the alien ship reverberated through the control room. His fingers hovered over the console, barely able to process the words. The fact that they were aware of his presence meant the clock was ticking faster than ever. Zara had given him this window of opportunity, and now he was running out of time. The lights in the room flickered once more, casting the facility in an eerie, dim light. Sam's breath quickened. He couldn't afford to hesitate any longer. "Zara," he shouted again, his voice sharp and strained. But again, there was no response. His mind spun. Had she been caught? Was she still fighting? His eyes darted across the control panel in front of him. His only hope now was to complete the task she'd set out for him. He needed to activate the jamming system and make sure it was strong enough to hide them from the Vartel ships. If Zara was fighting off their forces outside, the last thing she needed was to be targeted by their deadly weapons. Sam's hands shook slightly as he typed into the console, trying to stay focused. There was no time to be nervous. He had to do this, or they were both dead. The system's interface was archaic, by Vartel standards, but it was functional. He managed to get a signal out, but it wasn't strong enough. The alien ships would likely still detect them if they kept coming. Zara had mentioned using a larger frequency, one that would block their sensors entirely, but Sam wasn't sure how to access it. His eyes darted over the controls, trying to understand the complex series of menus. Then, he saw it, a console to his left, marked with a warning, Level 7 security override required. The controls were set behind a glass panel. Sam cursed under his breath. This was it. The system had an override that could amplify the jamming signal by 1,000 times, but to access it, he needed the security code. Without it, there was no way to unlock the system in time. His mind raced. Could he hack the system? If Zara were here, maybe, she could have done it in an instant. But he was human, a man with no special abilities, no advanced training. Just a man with grit and a boatload of courage. Then, his eyes caught on something else. A small, glowing panel near the back of the room. A secondary terminal, one that hadn't been noticed before. Sam's heart skipped a beat. This terminal could be the key. He made his decision in an instant, running toward it and praying he wasn't too late. Sam's fingers flew over the new terminal. There were no security codes, no complicated menus. It was simpler, almost too simple. But that was exactly what he needed. This was Zara's work. This was her plan, her fail-safe. She'd left him a way to finish what she'd started. The console blinked to life, and the system came alive with a rapid series of beeps and lights. Sam punched in the access codes as quickly as he could, and soon, he heard the soft, satisfying whir of the jamming system powering up. At first, nothing seemed to happen. But then, the hum outside grew quiet. The air inside the facility seemed to vibrate, as if it were charged with electricity. The lights flickered again, this time stabilizing. And then, with a violent pulse of energy, the entire system blinked. The cloaked ships outside, now exposed, began to falter. Sam smiled, breathless. He had done it. He'd bought them time. But the sense of relief didn't last long. A loud explosion rocked the facility, rattling the walls and knocking Sam off his feet. He slammed into the console, the air thick with smoke as the alarms blared. "No," Sam muttered, his heart sinking. "No, no, no." He scrambled to his feet, trying to get his bearings. The blast had come from outside, but it was far too close to be ignored. Zara. He had to find her. Now. Sam sprinted toward the door, which was now hanging crookedly from its frame. The facility was under attack. The Vartel had found them, and they were not going to let Zara or the system slip away so easily. The door opened with a groan, and Sam charged out into the chaos. Outside, the scene was as horrific as he'd imagined. The mountainside was bathed in red light, the sky fractured by explosions and laser fire. In the distance, the Vartel ships hovered, now fully visible, their engines glowing with ominous power. Zara was nowhere to be seen, but Sam's eyes immediately landed on a group of armored Vartel soldiers in the distance. They were moving toward something, no, toward someone. Zara. Without thinking, Sam dove for cover, crouching behind a rock. His heart was in his throat as he watched the soldiers close in on her position. She was kneeling on the ground, surrounded, but Sam could see her defiant posture. She was still alive. Zara wasn't the type to go down without a fight. But Sam knew they had to act quickly. If they didn't get her out of there soon, the aliens would overwhelm her. He searched his surroundings for any sign of a way to help her. A plan was forming in his mind, but it was risky. Dangerous. Still, it was the only chance they had. He had to get their attention. Sam scanned the battlefield. The Vartel soldiers were focused on Zara, but there was one thing they hadn't accounted for. Sam looked down at the small, cylindrical device Zara had left him. He had no idea what it could do, but he knew she wouldn't have given it to him without a reason. Taking a deep breath, he activated the device. There was a low hum as it powered up, followed by a brilliant flash of light. The air crackled with energy, and Sam saw the soldiers pause for a moment, their helmets flashing with alarm. The flash wasn't just a distraction. It was a signal. A pulse of electromagnetic interference that sent a shockwave rippling through the alien soldiers' suits, rendering their weapons useless. Zara reacted immediately. With the soldiers momentarily stunned, she surged forward, her movements swift and powerful. She disarmed one soldier, her glowing hands moving with surgical precision, knocking the alien to the ground in a single motion. Sam moved quickly, using the confusion to dart toward her. She looked up, her eyes meeting his as he neared. There was a flash of recognition, and then a brief, determined nod from her. "Let's finish this," Zara said, her voice fierce. Sam didn't hesitate. He was with her now, fully. And together, they would stop the Vartel, no matter the cost. The battlefield had descended into chaos. Sam and Zara moved as one, a synchronized unit, their bodies reacting to the combat instinctively. Zara's glowing hands seemed to move faster than Sam could track, disarming and incapacitating the Vartel soldiers with a brutal efficiency that left him in awe. The hum of Zara's device, an energy pulse that had stunned the enemy, was still ringing in his ears as the soldiers faltered, trying to recover from the shockwave. Sam didn't waste a moment. He fired a few shots from the weapon he had taken from one of the fallen soldiers, knocking another Vartel operative to the ground. The gunfire was loud, but the noise of the battle drowned it out. The Vartel soldiers regrouped quickly, their advanced suits and weapons far superior to anything Sam had ever seen, but they were disoriented and on the back foot. Zara was in the thick of the skirmish, moving fluidly between soldiers, her body dodging and striking with precision. It was as if she were dancing with death. Sam couldn't help but admire her control, her grace under pressure. They had one goal: get to the central control tower of the Vartel ship, the heart of their operations here on Earth. If they could disable it, the rest of the forces would fall apart, and the Vartel would be unable to launch any more attacks. They had a chance to end this, once and for all. But as they made their way toward the facility, something shifted in the air. Sam felt it before he saw it, a deep, gut-wrenching chill that crept through the environment like a shadow. His instincts flared, and he turned, scanning the area for any sign of danger. Zara seemed to sense it too. She stopped mid-motion, her eyes scanning the perimeter. The moment of hesitation was enough to make Sam's blood run cold. Something wasn't right. From the shadows of the craggy cliffs surrounding the outpost, a lone figure emerged, cloaked in a dark, intimidating armor. The figure moved with a grace that mirrored Zara's but with a certain ominous calmness that Sam knew was dangerous. The air felt heavier, charged with a cold, malignant energy that sent a shiver down Sam's spine. Zara's expression hardened. She didn't need to say anything for Sam to know this wasn't just another Vartel soldier. This was someone far more powerful. Zara, the figure's voice was low, cold, almost familiar. You've made a grave mistake. Sam's eyes widened. The voice. It wasn't just any soldier. This was the commander. The one who had spoken to them earlier over the comms. He had tracked them here, and now, there was no escaping. The figure's helmet glowed red as it locked eyes with Zara. His presence exuded authority and fear. A tall, imposing alien with features hidden beneath the smooth, reflective surface of his helmet. There was something inherently terrifying about him, like a predator stalking its prey. You should have never run, the commander continued, his tone unwavering. You were one of us, Zara. You had the potential to ascend. Instead, you betray your people, your species. His voice was a blend of sorrow and anger, but mostly anger. Zara's jaw clenched. I had no choice. You've lost your way. You've turned my people into something they were never meant to be. I couldn't stand by and watch. You will never make me go back. Sam felt a twinge of sympathy for Zara. The anguish in her voice was raw, and it was clear that this was not just about survival. This was about a personal war, a fight for her very soul. But Sam couldn't allow her to be captured, not now. They were so close to ending this. Zara, we need to move. Sam shouted, motioning to the control tower ahead. They didn't have time to fight him. But Zara didn't move. She stood her ground, her glowing eyes focused on the commander. Sam was about to protest when the commander raised his hand, and with a swift, fluid motion, Zara collapsed to her knees, as though an invisible force was gripping her. You can't win, Zara, the commander said, his voice deep and unwavering. Your fight is over. Sam's blood ran cold. He moved to grab Zara, but something stopped him, a force, an energy that he couldn't see but could feel in his bones. The commander was using his power against her, and for the first time, Sam saw Zara struggle to stay upright, her glowing skin flickering as if the energy was draining from her. Zara! Sam shouted, desperate. He reached for her, but the moment he touched her arm, the commander's voice boomed. Don't interfere, human. This does not concern you. But Sam wasn't listening. He wasn't about to stand by and watch Zara fall. He was done being a spectator in this war. He would fight for her. He would fight for Earth. Sam's hands shook as he grabbed one of the discarded alien weapons lying nearby. He pointed it at the commander, taking a steadying breath. The weapon hummed to life in his grip. The weapon had no place here, it was alien tech, beyond anything Sam had ever held. But it was their only chance. The commander glanced at Sam, his helmet giving off a low, menacing hum as he raised a hand to wave Sam off. You think you can stop me, human? I am beyond your understanding. Sam didn't care. He pulled the trigger. The shot was aimed directly at the commander's chest, but before it could hit, the commander's hand shot forward, and a wave of energy deflected the blast with ease, sending it ricocheting into the air. The commander turned his full attention to Sam, his eyes burning with contempt beneath his helmet. "You're a fool." In an instant, he closed the distance between them, knocking the weapon from Sam's hands with a single swipe. Sam stumbled backward, crashing into the rocks behind him. His breath hitched as the commander stood over him, raising his hand. "You've interfered too much," the commander said coldly, and Sam could feel the overwhelming pressure of the alien's power building around him. He was certain this was the end. He could see Zara struggling in the distance, barely conscious, and he felt a sense of hopelessness settle over him. But just as the commander's energy blast began to surge, a blinding light erupted from the distance, a pulse of energy that sent shockwaves through the battlefield. The ground trembled, and the commander froze, his expression faltering. Zara's form glowed brighter than ever before, her power restored and her fury unleashed. She stood tall, her eyes seething with determination. "Leave him alone!" Zara shouted, her voice filled with an unrelenting force. With a violent motion, Zara pushed back against the commander's power, sending him flying backward. Sam watched in awe as the commander struggled to regain control, his armor crackling with energy. Zara's voice, filled with rage and grief, reverberated through the air. "This ends now." The world seemed to slow as Zara's energy pulse slammed into the commander, sending him stumbling backward with a violent crash. The ground beneath them shook as the force rippled through the rocky terrain, splitting boulders and sending plumes of dust into the air. For a moment, everything was still, the air thick with tension. Sam blinked, stunned by the raw power Zara had unleashed. Her form glowed brighter than ever, her body radiating a fierce, otherworldly energy. It was as if she had become the embodiment of defiance itself, standing against the Vartel forces with a strength that Sam could barely comprehend. The commander, however, was far from defeated. Slowly, he rose to his feet, his armor crackling as he regained his balance. His once imposing stature now looked almost vulnerable, but there was no mistaking the seething rage in his eyes. His gaze locked onto Zara, burning with contempt. "You have no idea what you've done, Zara," he growled, his voice dripping with fury. "You've doomed yourself, and this entire world." Zara's eyes narrowed, the glow in them intensifying. She was breathing heavily, but her resolve was unwavering. "If I've doomed myself, then so be it. I will never let you conquer this world." The commander's hand shot up, and a crackling ball of energy formed above his palm. Sam instinctively stepped forward, his mind racing. He didn't have Zara's power, but he couldn't just stand there and watch her fight alone. The stakes were too high. Earth was on the brink of destruction, and Zara was their last hope. In a heartbeat, the commander hurled the energy sphere toward Zara, its trajectory fast and deadly. But Zara reacted with lightning speed, raising her hand to intercept the attack. A bright flash of light erupted as the two forces collided. The explosion was deafening, sending a shockwave through the ground and knocking Sam to the ground. Rocks crumbled around him, and the air was thick with smoke and dust. For a brief moment, everything was silent. When Sam finally pushed himself up, his ears ringing, he saw Zara standing tall, her body flickering with energy. The commander was on his knees, his armor dented and cracked, the once imposing figure now looking vulnerable. Sam's heart pounded in his chest. This was their moment. Zara had wounded him, but she wasn't finished yet. Sam had seen the ferocity in her fight, the determination to protect Earth. The Vartel commander wasn't going to give up, but neither was Zara. "We finished this together," Sam said under his breath, his eyes on the commander. Zara, still breathing heavily, looked toward Sam. Her expression softened for just a moment, gratitude flashing in her eyes. But there was no time for sentimentality. She was focused. The fight was far from over. Sam rushed to her side, instinctively reaching for the fallen weapon he'd discarded earlier. It was still intact, its barrel humming faintly with energy. He had no idea how to use it, but Zara had given him the tools he needed. Zara was already charging the next attack, her body flickering with energy as she raised both arms toward the commander, preparing for the next strike. The Vartel leader was struggling to stand, his hands raised as he summoned another blast, but Zara was faster. Before the commander could release his energy, Zara unleashed a torrent of light from her hands, an overwhelming surge of power that collided with the commander's attack. The clash created an explosion of force that rocked the battlefield, sending shockwaves through the cliffs. Sam felt the ground tremble beneath him, but he refused to back down. "Zara!" Sam shouted. He sprinted toward her, his heart pounding, as the energy between them flared up again. She was weakening, he could see it in her eyes. The battle had taken everything out of her, and the commander was still standing. But Sam had an idea. A dangerous one. In that moment, he knew what he had to do. He couldn't allow Zara to fight alone anymore. She had given him a chance to prove himself, to be more than just a helpless bystander. And now, he had to step up. He grabbed the weapon and sprinted toward the commander, dodging the rocks that had been thrown into the air by the last explosion. The commander was still reeling from Zara's last blow, his body unsteady. But his eyes narrowed when he saw Sam approaching. "You think you can stop me, human?" the commander sneered, his voice thick with disdain. Sam didn't answer. He didn't need to. He fired. The weapon was nothing like anything he had ever handled. Its force sent a shockwave through Sam's arm, knocking him off balance. But the blast struck true. It hit the commander in the chest, sending him sprawling backward. The commander's armor absorbed most of the blast, but the force still made him stumble, his breath ragged. Zara took advantage of the momentary opening. She surged forward, her energy crackling as she delivered the final blow. The commander's armor cracked under the force of her strike, and the energy that had once flowed through him was now snuffed out. He fell to the ground, defeated. For a moment, there was silence. Sam stood still, his body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. Zara, still glowing with the last vestiges of her power, turned to him. She gave him a slight nod of acknowledgement, nothing too grand, but enough for Sam to know that he had played his part. But there was no time for celebration. As the commander's body lay still, the air around them began to hum ominously. Sam could feel it in his bones, the Vartel fleet wasn't done. The mothership was still in orbit, and it was gathering its forces. "We need to move, now," Sam shouted, turning to Zara. She nodded, her face serious. "They're calling for reinforcements. If we don't act fast, they'll launch a full-scale assault." Sam looked around, his mind racing. The Vartel forces wouldn't be deterred so easily. Even without the commander, the fleet would still pose a tremendous threat. But Zara had given him a glimpse of what she was capable of. If they could disrupt the mothership's control systems, they could win this fight. Zara placed a hand on Sam's shoulder. "We're not done yet. The real battle is ahead." Sam took a deep breath, steeling himself. The fight was far from over, but with Zara by his side, he knew they had a chance. The battlefield was still, the remnants of the shattered Vartel commander's armor scattered across the rocky terrain. The faint hum of the alien ships in the distance reminded Sam that the war was far from over. Zara's victory, though significant, had only bought them a brief respite. The mothership in orbit was still functional, and the Vartel forces would not stop until they had reclaimed their lost ground. Sam and Zara stood in the midst of the chaos, their bodies bruised and weary from the fight. The world felt strangely quiet after the explosive clashes, the smoke from the explosions still swirling in the air. They had just taken down the commander, a major blow to the Vartel, but it wasn't enough. Sam knew they needed to act quickly if they were going to avoid an all-out assault on Earth. Zara's glowing skin flickered, her energy still pulsing from the battle, but it was clear that her power was starting to wane. She had fought hard, and Sam could see the toll it had taken on her. Her breaths were shallow, her expression one of deep focus. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice steady but strained. "The mothership is already preparing to launch. If we don't disable it now, they will come back with reinforcements. And when they do, Earth won't stand a chance." Sam looked up at the sky, seeing the massive ship looming above them, its dark form barely visible against the clouds. The ship was enormous, and it wasn't just a symbol of the Vartel's might, it was their command center. If they couldn't shut it down, the Vartel would overwhelm Earth in a matter of hours. "I'll do whatever it takes," Sam said, determination clear in his voice. "What do we need to do?" Zara took a deep breath, wiping the sweat from her forehead as she looked toward the mountainside. "There's a hidden facility beneath the surface. It's where the Vartel control their systems, where the mothership's mainframe is located. If we can access it, we can send a pulse strong enough to disable the ship's core systems." Sam nodded. "Where is it?" "It's not far from here, but the facility is heavily guarded," Zara said, her voice low. "I can guide you there, but once we're inside, we'll have to move fast. The Vartel will detect us, and the moment we enter, they'll send everything they have after us." Sam's grip tightened around the alien weapon still in his hand. The weapon was still unfamiliar, but it was functional, and right now, it was all they had. "We've taken down their commander. We can take down the mothership." Zara gave him a faint smile. "I hope you're right. Let's go." They made their way toward the hidden facility, their steps quick and deliberate. The forest that surrounded them seemed eerily quiet, but Sam could feel the tension in the air, like the calm before the storm. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faintest sound of something far more dangerous than nature. As they reached the entrance to the facility, hidden in the side of the mountain, Sam's heart pounded in his chest. Zara's knowledge of the place made her the only one who could lead them through the security systems. She pressed a hand against the stone, and a faint blue light illuminated the rock face. A door, once invisible to the naked eye, slid open with a low hiss. Inside, the facility was cold and sterile, with long, dark corridors and rows of machines that hummed softly in the background. Sam felt the weight of the situation press in on him as they moved deeper into the heart of the Vartel operation. He knew this was their last chance to stop the invasion. Zara led them through a maze of twisting hallways, her eyes scanning the walls as she muttered to herself. She seemed to be navigating by instinct, every turn purposeful, every movement precise. Sam followed closely behind, doing his best to keep up. His mind raced with questions. What would happen if they failed? How many lives were at stake? Could they really take down the mothership? But he couldn't afford to dwell on that now. There was no turning back. At last, they reached the central chamber, a vast room filled with screens and control panels. In the center of the room stood a massive console, the control hub for the mothership. Zara immediately moved toward it, her hands flying over the controls. "I need to access the core systems," she said, her voice urgent. "Once I have control, I can send the pulse." Sam glanced over his shoulder, his senses alert. They had made it this far without detection, but Zara's actions were sure to trigger alarms soon. He didn't know how much time they had left, but he could feel the pressure mounting. Suddenly, the lights in the facility flickered, and an alarm blared. Zara cursed under her breath as she continued to work on the console. "They've detected us. We've got minutes before the whole place goes into lockdown." Sam's mind raced. He could hear the sound of boots echoing down the corridor, the unmistakable hum of alien technology approaching. The Vartel were coming for them. Zara's fingers moved faster, the glow from her hands illuminating the console as she worked feverishly. "I've almost got it," she muttered. "Just a little longer." The door to the chamber burst open, and a group of heavily armored Vartel soldiers rushed in, weapons raised. Sam's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't ready for this. He wasn't trained for this. But there was no turning back now. He had no choice but to fight. The first soldier lunged at him, and Sam fired, hitting the soldier square in the chest. The Vartel soldier crumpled to the ground with a thud, but more were coming, and Sam knew he couldn't hold them off for long. Zara's energy pulse lit up the room, sending a wave of force through the soldiers, knocking them off balance. But it wasn't enough to stop them. They were too many. "Sam, cover me!" Zara shouted. Sam did his best to keep the soldiers at bay, using every ounce of strength and skill he had to dodge their attacks and fire his weapon. The Vartel soldiers were relentless, but Sam wasn't about to let them win. Through the chaos, Zara's voice rang out again. "It's done." In that instant, the room went dark, the lights flickering out as the pulse emitted from the console. A low hum filled the air, and the ground shook beneath their feet. The Vartel soldiers froze in place, their weapons twitching in their hands. The mothership above them began to flicker, its massive form trembling as the systems began to shut down. "We did it," Zara said, her voice filled with a mixture of exhaustion and relief. She collapsed to the ground, her energy finally spent. Sam rushed to her side, kneeling beside her. "Zara, we made it. We stopped them." Zara's eyes met his, a faint smile on her face. "We did it. Together." As the Vartel forces crumbled, their mothership in orbit slowly powered down, its lights fading as the pulse took effect. The remaining soldiers on the ground were no longer a threat. Earth was safe, at least for now. But as Sam looked at Zara, he knew this was just the beginning. The Vartel had been stopped, but their empire was vast, and their hunger for control would never fade. But with Zara's knowledge and humanity's resolve, they had shown the universe that Earth was not just a target, it was a force to be reckoned with. And as Sam and Zara stood together, the dawn of a new alliance began, one that would change the fate of both their worlds forever. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. For more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon, so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.